What is up, everyone? My name is Brendan McKenzie, and this is my final project. In this presentation, I'm focusing on the question, aren't the liberal arts outdated? I wanted to focus on this question because I feel that the term liberal arts education has been around for many years and it dates way back. And, people could argue that, reading the old books or having the old liberal arts philosophy won't help in today's world. But I wanted to reconsider that idea, with the help of Adam Grant's Think Again book and, through the Dominican tradition, which encourages lifelong learning and the search for truth. In today's world with all the new technology and new knowledge and new jobs, there's so many ways to learn, and they just keep coming up with more facts and scientific ways and things like that. And because of that, people might think about or say that liberal arts, it's outdated. But after researching, I've learned that liberal arts actually keeps up and is not outdated. The liberal arts trains us to listen and to adapt. And that's exactly why the book Think Again by Adam Grant is called Think Again, because it trains you to think and consider all angles. So in Think Again, Adam Grant says that the smartest people are not the ones who know everything. They're the ones who are willing to rethink what they know. And he calls this confident humility. That means being confident enough to share your ideas, but humble enough to admit you might be wrong. And, being wrong is perfectly okay. It's an open-minded classroom. And for me, that connects perfectly to liberal arts education because, the whole point of just studying philosophy and literature and ethics is to, challenge what we know as true and challenge our beliefs. And it's not about, memorizing random facts. It's about learning how to think again and again. One of the readings that I read that actually stood out to me is called Educating the Adult Brain. And it explains that the adult brain can keep learning and changing throughout life because of something that we have called neuroplasticity. That basically means every time we read or discuss or reflect, we're actually reshaping our brain. It's forever changing. So if our brains are built to adapt, then liberal arts isn't outdated. They're a way to keep the mind flexible and lucrative. They train us for a lifelong of learning and not just one job or one skill that might disappear in 5 years. It's just a whole process and system instead of just information, if that makes sense. So I also read Motivating Factors in Adult Learners, and the authors of that found that adults return to learning not just for a paycheck, but because they want purpose and meaning. That really connects to why liberal arts matters. These subjects give us time to think about life's big questions, like justice, truth, purpose, the things that really, make us human. And when I think about my own education, I see that learning through a liberal arts lens has really just shaped the way I see people, ideas, and even conflict. It's not just about the knowledge and who's right and who's wrong. It's more about becoming a better and more thoughtful person. So the Dominican tradition centers around the pursuit of truth. It's about study, reflection, and preaching, and not just preaching in like religious sense, just about sharing what you learned with others. That connects perfectly to what liberal arts is trying to do. A Dominican education doesn't separate knowledge from life, it combines them, in my opinion. You study to become wiser, and then you use that wisdom to like help the people out around you, your community. And that's why I think liberal arts is very relevant. It's not about just making a living, but it's more about making a difference. So as a student in a liberal arts, at a liberal arts college, I've realized that most of my most memorable lessons haven't came from like the actual academics, like the tests or the grades. It's came from hearing other people's like perspectives, or like writing about something that is true to me and sharing it with other people, and then figuring out how to connect my life in like sports and art to like my message, if that makes sense. And I feel like that's a beautiful thing. It shows how everything can connect. And I feel like someone that's open-minded and is willing to debate things, and yeah, just really open-minded, they look for that, and someone that thinks critically, obviously. And a lot of people say like, or I've heard people say that, liberal arts doesn't make a difference and it's not really marketable. But I think we need to rethink that one, because, liberal arts, you can really communicate. I know I can, at least, way better than I used to be able to. It's about critical thinking and, solving a problem and being able to adapt, Well, we need that in today's world with all the, technology and all that. And those are all skills that companies definitely will want out of someone. So, and then in the book, Grant said that we need to let go of the old belief that useful only means technical. In reality, adaptability and curiosity are what make people successful over time. And that's what the liberal arts really build. The Dominican tradition teaches that, study and reflecting the study never stops. Every stage of life gives us a chance to grow and rethink who we are. That connects to Think Again by Grant, and the idea that thinking again keeps us open-minded, creative, and humble. When we stop learning, you can get stagnant in life, but when you stay curious and stay mentally alive, that's when all the mental and spiritual growing really happens as a person. And that's why I think, liberal arts isn't outdated. It's timeless. It keeps us in a good habit of learning and questioning and overall just growing. So the answer to my question is no. I do not think the liberal arts are outdated. If anything, I would go as far to say that they're more important than ever. It teaches how to think, how to listen, and how to find meaning in a crazy, changing world. And the Dominican vision of truth, reflection, and community reminds us that education isn't just about preparing for a job, it's about preparing for a more meaningful life. And these are my citations, and I'm going to thank you guys for listening. And, it was awesome seeing all the different perspectives throughout the year.